Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Navis Nobilite. And today I am beginning the Space Marine Fleet Overview. This general fleet overview is going to describe the Space Marine fleet in a broad sense, because many attributes of the Space Marine fleet are ultimately very similar to the Imperial Navy, but their actual fleet tactics differ wildly. As the Imperial Navy generally focuses heavily on its cruisers, the Space Marine fleet does not do the same. In fact, the Space Marine fleet is heavily focused towards much lighter, far more maneuverable, and far more upgunned attack craft, specifically their escorts. Their basic cruiser happens to actually be a rather up armored and potentially upgunned light cruiser that is revolving around a number of very tough but not necessarily very powerful battle barges. Now you can augment a lot of the firepower of your fleet by taking certain venerable battle barges that can either make you launch more ordnance or give you that desperate firepower that you need. Now, the Space Marine fleet has been a matter of some contention for quite some time in Battlefleet Gothic, mostly because in Battlefleet Gothic, Space Marines aren't the poster boy. In fact, the Space Marines in Battlefleet Gothic have always held a position of second banana to the Imperial Navy, and that is actually for a very important, very fluffy reason. Namely, after the Horus Heresy, one of the reformations that were done was to place checks and balances on the Space Marine chapters to prevent them from ever doing the Horus Heresy again. And the result of that is they were granted use of glorified troop transports instead of full on warships, mostly because the Imperial Navy is there to make sure they don't get uppity again. Now, this does not mean they have dedicated warships. They absolutely do. Now, a lot of the complaints about the weakness of the Space Marine fleet were changed in the 2010 FAQ. A lot of upgrade options were given to the strike cruiser, giving it a great deal more flexibility in combat. Also, the addition of venerable battle barges was brought in to allow the Space Marine fleet to have a certain level of big guns never tire. You have a lot of choices when it comes to venerable battle barges, and they really can give you a little bit more punching power in a fleet that ultimately was designed to be highly maneuverable, very escort oriented, and uh, dedicated to the action of planetary assaults and boarding. With these updated rules, they're a little bit better in the fleet combat area, but you will still find yourself struggling against certain races if you aren't prepared. The greatest weakness to the Space Marine fleet are lances. Lances are almost unheard of in the Space Marine list, and their amazing armor doesn't help them when you're hitting them on a 4. So the Space Marine list is another one of these finesse lists. They are played, generally speaking, by people who really love Space Marines and really want to have the opportunity to represent their favorite chapter in the game. Now, another thing that brings up a great deal of argument is, well, why aren't there chapter specific lists? Why aren't there chapter specific rules? And given one exception, which is the Grey Knights, there is ultimately no difference between a ship full of Ultramarines and a ship full of Salamanders, or a ship full of Blood Angels and a ship full of Rainbow Warriors. There just is no difference at this scale. 1,000 points of Space Marines, no matter what chapter, will roughly do the same amount of damage as 1,000 points of any other chapter. And given that a single strike cruiser has so many Space Marines and Space Marine assets on them, the difference really doesn't matter. So if you want to make your ships and your fleet more specific uh, to your desired chapter, there are a couple of things you can do in regards to fluff. Like if you're a Dark Angels chapter lover, you will be taking a lot more hunter escorts, which it says in their description the Dark Angels take more hunters than pretty much any other escort. There are also 3 separate kinds of Space Marine fleet to take, which can, again, make your fleet a little more fluffy. Like if you're Black Templar, you're likely going to be taking the Crusade list. So just bear in mind the Space Marines have a purpose in Battlefleet Gothic, and their purpose is a little bit different than most other fleets. When it comes to planetary assault or exterminatus, they are the kings of the field. There is really no other fleet in the game that can stand up and actively compete with the Space Marines. If you're defending on a planetary assault mission, you're going to have a real hard time against Space Marines. But if you're doing a fleet engagement or a cruiser clash, you may find yourself having a bit of an advantage, unless the Space Marine player is particularly skilled. Remember to not get overconfident when you're facing Space Marines, because even if they're comprised primarily of light cruisers and slow-moving battle barges, even one light cruiser boarding you, even one strike cruiser boarding you is a bad day. There's no situation where being boarded by a Space Marine makes you feel good. Now, side note for Grey Knights. The Grey Knights do get special rules, but that's because the Grey Knights have a very special and very unique purpose, not only in the Imperium of Man, but they also have access to the highest technology that the Imperium has to offer. They have a large set of very specific rules that I will be covering later, mostly because the Forces of the Inquisition are a much later addition to the game. So I will get onto them in a separate fleet list, but recognize that the Space Marine fleet itself is more flexible than the Grey Knights. The Grey Knights have fewer options for upgrades, and their vessels are more expensive. Alright everyone, thank you all so much for listening to this video. I'm going to start talking about the Space Marine vessels as soon as I start pressing the recording button again. Have a great day, and I'll talk to you all again soon.